Hello, my friends, Evolutionary Energy Arts family. Thank you guys for joining us.
Thank you. Welcome back.
So, in my mind and in Cindy's mind, this is a fun topic.
This is very fun to me, yeah.
So, many people are familiar with the concept of reincarnation, especially in line with the Eastern philosophies of the world, such as, obviously, Hinduism, Buddhism, Jainism, Sikhism, as well as others. The concept of reincarnation is just it's a given, right? But how about in Christianity? This is a good one. So we'll start with Matthew 17:10. The disciples asked Jesus, why then do the scribes say that Elijah must come first? So this is in reference to the coming of the Messiah, is what they're talking about. And Jesus replied, Elijah does indeed come, and he will restore all things. But I tell you that Elijah has already come, and they did not recognize him. But they have done to him whatever they wished. In the same way, the Son of Man will suffer at their hands. So, Cindy's not as familiar with the Bible as I am. So, what do you take of that?
Well, to me, it's just really cryptic. It's not really saying anything.
Well, it's about deciphering and looking in deep. So, when we look into this, what I take this as is that Jesus is saying Elijah did come again. And again, they didn't recognize him, just like they're not most of them are not recognizing Jesus as well. And so the thought is that Elijah is John the Baptist, in a reincarnated as John the Baptist. Now, that will conflict with some of our metaphysical teachings, because we have Enoch becoming, according to some of the traditions, becomes Metatron. And then we have Elijah becoming Sandalphon. So those are two great archangels. But perhaps it doesn't contradict in the bigger scheme of things as well, because we have avatars, right? In the Vedic tradition, we have avatars. So Vishnu has come back, and Vishnu has been Rama, and Vishnu has also been Krishna, right? And yet he's still Vishnu, right? The preserving force of the universe. So perhaps not contradictory. But the thought is that Elijah was John the Baptist, who was, of course, put to death. And he paved the way, of course, according to the Bible and, other books that did not make it into the Bible. John the Baptist, perhaps he wasn't a scene. It certainly seems like that's the case, as baptism wasn't a scene ritual. And he paved the way for Jesus. And so the thought is that Elijah and Elisha, if you guys are familiar with your Old Testament, are indeed the same beings coming again in the case of John the Baptist and Jesus. The only thing is they've switched positions. So the teacher has become the master and the master the teacher.
And I feel that that's a sort of a common thing that happens over and over again in lives and other lives.
Yeah, so it's pretty interesting. It really, really is pretty interesting. And then, of course, he's referencing to his own coming crucifixion there with the next line. So very interesting. There is the thought of reincarnation in the Bible. And when we go into like the Gnostic texts, as well as some of the pseudepigrapha and all the ones that were omitted, again, recognize there's only 4 Gospels. There was over 200. So what we have in the Bible is just a tiny little portion of all the books that were in circulation. Now, Hinduism, it makes up 80% of the population of India. There's a belief in many gods, but recognize that while they have many gods, they don't view any of these gods as being, the totality of everything. So in the totality of everything is something that's known as Brahman, which is unknowable. And that's the same thing as Taoism, because you have the Tao, which we can understand because it manifests as duality, and everything in our realm of existence is a dualistic view of things. And that's how things actually come into being, because if there was only light, how would you have any form? So you need the darkness to reflect back with the light to give us different gradients. So we have all these different shades of gray, and so then we have the possibility, of form and of this realm that we find ourselves in, this matrix. And so we have the belief in many gods, yet there is the belief in one absolute or original source. Now, in Jainism, they don't really believe there's one ultimate God. They believe that everything, all the totality of everything, is basically expressions of this one reality that is split into so many different beings, which again, in Hinduism too, you have the Jiva, which is the eternal soul that goes through the reincarnations, which is basically a piece of source. Source lies within us. God lies within us. They have the belief in reincarnation, rebirth of souls after death, and karma, the law of cause and effect. So what we do in past lives affects the next ones, in our current life. And so, when people say, why did this tragedy happen to somebody so young? This can explain that, working off karma, and it makes sense out of something that might make no sense.
And for me, it kind of talks about DNA memory also.
Most definitely, because everything we experience, we take with us. Now, there's a veil, unless you are somebody that has achieved a very high state of spiritual raising of vibrations, that you might be able to break down that veil and remember your past lives. Because, this is something that, for instance, Krishna said to Arjuna right before a great battle. He said, the difference between me and you is I remember my past lives, and thus I know who I am. I'm self-realized. Self-realization is the goal of many different religions over in the East, religions/philosophies. Really knowing who you are and what you are as we pass through this cycle of basically, coming back and doing it all over again. And so when we see the Bhagavad Gita, which is the most popular of the Hindu texts, just as a person casts off worn-out garments and puts on others that are new, even so does the embodied soul cast off worn-out bodies and takes on others that are new. And so it's basically a learning experience. It's soul growth. No weapon can cut the soul into pieces, nor can it be burned by fire, nor moistened by water, nor withered by wind. So that is indestructible. It is totally indestructible, and thus that part of us is eternal.
Yeah, and I think once we start to understand that and grasp that, it frees us of a lot of fear.
Exactly. Oh, tremendously. Tremendously. Then we can operate on a much higher plane. Reincarnation is the belief that each of us goes through a series of lifetimes for the purpose of spiritual growth and soul development. It's all about soul development. And Edgar Cayce was a big proponent of reincarnation. Subject reincarnation was explored in nearly 2,000 different Edgar Cayce life readings from 1923 and 1945. The Cayce approach to reincarnation focuses on practical ways of dealing with one's current life by living, growing, and being of service in the present. It isn't nearly so important who we have been as it is we focus on the present and the opportunities and challenges we face today. And also know that what we do today is going to affect what happens to us later. So it's, again, karma, law, cause, and effect. And if you want to take a more Judeo-Christian term, so we have the statement, it is given once to die and then the judgment. And that's what it says. Now, yeah, we die. There is a judgment, but it's us and our actions that judge ourselves. It's the karma. It's the law of cause and effect that judges what's going to happen in the next lifetime. And the studies then know where ye are going, to find that ye only lived, died, and were buried under the cherry tree in grandmother's garden does not make thee one whit better neighbor, citizen, mother, or father, but to know that ye spoke unkindly and suffered for it, and in the present may correct it by being righteousness. Now that is worthwhile. So that was an Edgar Cayce reading. Our talents or skills are never lost. Someone who has developed an ability in one life will certainly have it to draw upon later. Our abilities are channeled in the directions that will help us to fulfill our purpose for a particular lifetime. So that, you ever wonder why people are so gifted in certain things? And as you said, it's a DNA memory. It's a DNA hereditary thing that we're working with.
It is. And you, how do you know when you have like a DNA memory? I know that something is speaking to my DNA when it draws my attention.
Yes, most definitely. And there are things that we're going to be just drawn to. As a kid, I was always drawn to everything Eastern, so I was drawn to go and join the martial arts and to practice meditation. As I said, I used to go into my closet as a little kid, like 7 years old, close the closet door, light a candle, and that was naughty. I know I shouldn't be lighting candles at 7 years old. Kids out there, don't light candles without your parents around. And then I would just meditate, at that age. That's kind of unusual. But then I also, when I was 5 and I was first going to school and it was Christmas vacation and I didn't want to go back to school and I caught a really bad cold, there was what now I would take to be a spirit guide that was talking to me and saying, you're only sick because you allowed it. You manifested it. And that's weird for like a 5-year-old to have that realization. And it's happened to me in the past as well after that. And that's that knowing. We could tap into our abilities from past lives, and there's some things that will just come easier to us. So another key thing is karma. Word karma is a Sanskrit term that means work, deed, or act. It can also be interpreted to mean cause and effect, the law of cause and effect. And it's a hermetic law as well. If we go into the Western traditions and Hermeticism, Gnostic texts, the Kabbalah, these are all just given. And in the West, again, it's had to be hidden because of, the domination of the church, and that you're only going to have one line of thinking and you cannot deviate from it upon pain of death often, as well, as we know with the Inquisition, with the witch hunts and everything. For an example, an individual may meet a person, feel immediate affinity, or the opposite, animosity. The subconscious memory will have an effect on how they think and act, but the component of free will is always available. The readings indicate there really isn't karma between people, so to speak. Instead, there's karma with oneself. It's all about us. It's all about our journey. And again, it's not that you're going to be judged by a vengeful God. You're judged by what you've done. It's your own law of cause and effect in action. And it's all about learning and growing and rising up into a higher vibratory frequency.
And it's really curious. Today I had a client, we had a client that I had gone into his past life and removed blocks of guilt in a past life. And when I told him about that and this story that I received, things became so clear for him. Suddenly he understood something that made no sense to him. So these things can be really helpful.
Most definitely. So resurrection, reincarnation, let's stick with that first, and life after death. In Cayce's explanation of reincarnation, when we die, the next lifetime does not occur immediately, for the soul is given a chance to take stock of all that it has come to know. Then we decide for ourselves on what lessons we need to learn next. Our soul chooses to be born again into the earth, generally among people we have known before. We can choose to be born male or female in any given lifetime, or as Cayce often called it, incarnation. The choices made are such that our soul might best be fulfilling a specific purpose chosen for a particular lifetime. We select surroundings, family, parents, location, time period, and the very stars themselves. It's just like I was trying to relate this to Cindy. As a kid, I used to play Dungeons and Dragons, and all you did was play it with pencil, paper, your imagination, and some dice. And so your avatar that you're creating for that journey in that game, you might have what we call like 100 hit points, if I remember right. And you have different talents and things to spread it out. So you have things like dexterity, you have things like wisdom, like strength and endurance, just to give you a few. And so you could choose to go with 25 points of strength and 10 points of wisdom and, whatever it is. And it's kind of like that when we choose what stars to be born under because of their influences. And so, perhaps in the past life, maybe we were pretty well off, and maybe we didn't share as much as we should have been sharing. Maybe we closed the door to some people that were really, really in need. And so decide, what, next life I'm going into a challenging financial condition. So I'm going to choose parents over here, then an impoverished nation. But there's the opportunity perhaps to rise above and help all these other people rise up as well. So things like that I would want to add.
Yeah, you would want to definitely add things like that to your reincarnation and build upon your avatar and collect these beautiful jewels of wisdom and understanding and knowledge that you can share with other people. And it's all about growth ultimately. It's all about growth, and the people you run into, you never know when those people might be, I don't know, a friend from a past life or something. So it's all just really curious once you really start digging into it kind of deep.
And this explains too why sometimes we meet people, because we do tend to incarnate in the same sort of family, same sort of group, so the situation can change. It can be that your mother in this life will be your daughter in the next, or maybe it'll be your son in the next. And it could be your best friend is going to be your father in the next life. That type of thing does change, but we tend to gravitate in the same sort of soul group. So when you meet somebody and all of a sudden you have a certain feeling for them, either positive or negative, and you can't really understand why, it could be because it's leftover energy from the relationship in a past relationship.
And I've definitely had those where I can't explain myself. I can't explain my feelings or my actions, and they're not necessarily, I don't know, not acceptable to me because this person is giving me a bad vibe. What have they done? They've done nothing wrong, but you just get this vibe off of them. But what's happening is your soul is reading your DNA energy. That's what I feel is happening there.
And just as the universe that we are in is holographic, so is your DNA. And so, again, this is a changing thing. Your DNA extends beyond your body. It's more than just your physical body. It's an imprint that's on the energetic bodies as well. So remember that we may not always be able to understand why a certain situation was drawn to us, and in fact, the why may not be of primary importance. What is important is how we choose to respond. And the way we respond to any given situation determines the next experience to be called into action. So when we're in these times, and what might be just around the corner, as you guys know, there's a big event happening a week from today. So there may be a lot of chaos. There might be a lot of anger, being strewn about. You're going to see people acting perhaps poorly. They already are out there in many cases. Every action has a reaction, and there's a karmic consequence for it. So we don't want to be pulled into lowering our vibrations. We have to raise up. We're here to raise up this planet, especially in this time of great upheaval. So, this is a huge journey, and this is a lot of responsibility that we find ourselves in being in this time. So, pioneers in reincarnation research, if you guys want to go deeper, Dr. Brian Weiss has done a lot in past life regressions. And so, he has discovered in, I believe, thousands and thousands of cases, evidence, and I've read several of his books, of reincarnation. He didn't have any other explanation for it when he starts doing these past life regressions. First, a lot of hypnotists have found this, and our own Dr. Joe, who's a friend, can do hypnotism and past life regression. And, it's just really wild. One of my, my naturopath that helped me with Lyme's disease, she was regressed, and she grew up in the Ukraine, and she found that in her past life, she was actually a German soldier in World War II, and she even remembered her death. She was shot on a railroad track and lied there on the railroad track, slowly bleeding out. And interesting that, in her next life, she chose to incarnate in a country. The Ukraine is a country now, but when she was born, it was part of the Soviet Union. So she incarnated on the other side instead of as a male, as a female. And there's many other people here if you want to delve into their work. I'll give you this link, like Dr. Ian Stevenson, Dr. Michael Newton, Carol Bowman, Dr. Bruce Goldberg. So many that have, and these are doctors. These are people that are very well educated that have found that there's overwhelming evidence for reincarnation. Hinduism and the belief of rebirth. So this is central to Hinduism, as we said, but also to Buddhism, to Sikhism, to Jainism. And I do plan on going much more in depth on these different philosophies in upcoming videos, as many people never probably even heard of Jainism, don't even know what it is, for instance. But I'm studying that right now. I've read into it before, but now going in depth as well. And so they all hold to this belief, this central tenet. And so some very, very advanced souls, as we look right here, of Krishna / Vishnu, they're up to a place where they don't have to come back anymore. So they might have achieved self-realization. And at the highest level, you have what's called moksha, which is the release from samsara and the wheel of rebirth. At that time, then, we're one with Brahman, not the creator god Brahma, as in the trinity of Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva. But Brahman is the unknowable everything. So it's that before which anything comes into form. So, there are so many different ways of looking at this, so many different viewpoints and labels we could put onto it. But ultimately, it's that which is before anything that is manifest. And so we can ultimately go back into that state. But then we have the devas, when we're talking about the gods of Hinduism, who are at a very, very high realm, but they're staying there. So they're kind of like, you could view it as, they're very much people, completely, with emotions and personalities, yet they're at a very, very high level where, like with the angelic realm, they're kind of maintaining the order of the universe. And so, they're kind of doing a job up there, maintaining the order of the universe.
Yeah, their perspective is quite a bit different. They see things from a higher perspective, and a lot of people, I feel, have access to these beings, and all you need to do is just focus on them and allow them into your energy field, and they can work through you, with you.
So in Hinduism, it's really, really common to have, one basically benefactor deity, or maybe more than one, that you focus on. Now, there are also archetypes. They're archetypes, and you could go to the work of Joseph Campbell if you want to learn more about archetypes from a Western perspective. But when you look at Buddhism, the focus is not on them. The focus is basically on achieving liberation and becoming part of the oneness that exists before there's any sort of manifestation like we see in this reality. So it's rejoining with the all. And so in each of these traditions, they have a little bit different take on it, but ultimately they're all pointing in the same direction, and they all believe in reincarnation and the fact that we've been here before. We will probably be here again. It's all about learning.
And there's many different flavors of these beings and this whole topic, this issue. So anybody can find what they like and what's best for them, and just sort of follow it, explore it, see where it takes you.
One of the big things about the age that we're going to be stepping into, and that's going to be developing, is it's going to be an age where we're going to transcend all the dogmas. And we will no longer need the dogmas. We'll just basically be working on the spiritual side of things in much more depth. So that's where we are going. It's going to be discarding the divisive dogma and embracing the ultimate knowledge that what we're working towards is that oneness. And, diversity is a beautiful thing. Again, as much as you might like pizza, would you want to eat it for every meal of every single day? Just to give you, for instance, or you might have some other favorites. Diversity is beautiful. And diversity is basically part of the plan of Source, of Brahman, because what we see is such a diversity in creation. And yet that Source resides inside every single one of its creations. And ultimately, we will all return to that Source.
Oh, yeah, and Source wants to explore itself. So every one of us, we're a unique expression of Source, and we're here to explore that expression.
As always, guys, thank you for your support on Ko-Fi and Patreon. God bless and namaste.
Namaste.